Hey everybody, it's Jason Blah here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about why I recommend the strength standards that I recommend to all healthy young men, and why it actually leads to balanced muscular development and body composition. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skill at my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. And when I explain some of this will make a lot more sense to people, because it'll be like, how can you just throw out arbitrary numbers like a 200 press, a 500 deadlift? Because they're really not arbitrary, because they represent a capacity for workload, and these things represent a certain body composition when you throw them out there, and particularly when we throw in the weighted chin up and pull up standard, that doesn't allow you to be fat. Like if you hit these strength standards that I'm putting out there and you're fat, you would have to have some monstrously strong biceps and lats, right? So you're probably going to have really big guns if you actually hit these strength standards if you're 25% body fat. Let's be realistic here. You're going to have to be stupidly jacked in your upper body to pull that off. So in that case, you're probably on a different level anyways, and that's what people need to understand. We control body composition by throwing in that weighted body weight exercise standard, and that matters a lot. What we always say historically, used to always hear people say, they would even tell guys back in my day, and even Lobliner talked about this, that the old school guys in the gym used to tell guys if they went on any sort of steroid before they could bench 300, squat 400, deadlift 500, they were made fun of. Lobliner even said that in his day, some of the guys, they beat him up. They considered him to be a punk. And that's from a different era, and that was even around bodybuilders and stuff. And people need to understand, back in the day, even bodybuilders understood that size and strength were correlated. And all those guys understood that even people who go into the whole bodybuilding thing and go on a bunch of drugs or whatever, that if they built a natural base first and actually got strong on the big lifts, they would get better results. They'd get better results and have to put less stuff into their body. And if you're going to be natural, you need these strength standards to build a size base. You absolutely need this. But a lot of people will say, well, look, I mean, anyone can get really fat and hit those numbers, and they might not have the most overall development, because it really could leave a lot lagging in like the shoulders and arms and things. And I agree with that. And that's why I throw these other exercises in. So my strength standards are the 300 bench, 400 squat, 500 deadlift, 200 press, the overhead press, standing overhead press. And that doesn't mean a push press, and it doesn't mean coming down to your ears. That means unracking it, walking it out, and pressing it, and then walking it back into a rack, okay? It's pretty hard to do a partial with that. So that, and then a 100-pound pull-up or chin-up, meaning 100 pounds of plates. And if the reason I say this is not that these are easy to get. A lot of people say, well, it would take me forever to reach those. I would have to train so hard. Exactly. You would have to get reasonably big and reasonably strong. And if you can hit all of those numbers or their proxies, because I don't say that you have to hit them, you just need to be capable of hitting them. Well, do most people develop a 300 bench by doing nothing but 1 rep maxes on their bench? No. They do a bunch of 5s, a bunch of 8s. You do other stuff, guys. So we could carry these over to 5 rep max proxies. In other words, if you can bench, if you throw it into like a calculator at 85%, if you can do, I don't know, like a 340 squat for 5 reps, you can probably squat 400, right? If you can bench 255 for 5 reps, you can probably hit a 300 1 rep max. If you can deadlift 425 for 5 reps, right? And a lot of guys base build with 5s. A lot of guys base build with 8s. So you have an idea of what you should be able to do. But yeah, if you can deadlift 425 for 5 reps, you can probably pull 500. If you get in your zone, get a good breath, get your technique down, you could probably pull 500. Totally reasonable. And that's what people need to understand with this. These can be proxies. You don't even have to hit a 1 rep max to be capable of this and to estimate, yeah, I probably am at this strength level. And the reason I say that is that what we're talking about is just overall strength and muscular development. If you can hit all of these numbers, you're going to be reasonably jacked. You're going to have good development. And then when we throw in the overhead press and the pull-up and chin-up, that really impacts the overall aesthetics of guys. And I think that weighted pull-up and chin-up, if we throw that in, That makes a big, big difference, because if you can squat 400 and deadlift 500, you don't have chicken legs usually, right? Your lower body has a fair amount of weight. That's going to make a weighted pull-up and a weighted chin-up harder. The guys who are really good oftentimes at chin-ups don't have legs, right? A lot of guys who are really good at these bodyweight exercises. But if you're actually squatting and deadlifting heavy, and you can hit a heavy-ass weighted chin-up or weighted pull-up, that's a lot harder than a guy who doesn't train legs. You're probably carrying up to an extra 10 pounds of muscle on your lower body that you have to pull up. So in other words, you being able to do 100 pounds, if you train your legs, you have to have pretty good sized biceps to do that. You've got to have a pretty thick and wide back to do that. You've got to have some decent upper body development to pull that off. Because chin-ups and pull-ups are a straight up muscle builder. It's hard to technique your way through that. That's one of those exercises that when you do it from a dead hang and you don't swing or do partials, to just walk up with 90 or 100 pounds and just chin and pull it from a dead hang, when you have legs, you have to have upper body development. And anyone who's been around the training world knows chin-ups and pull-ups are tremendous mass builders for the upper body. So that kind of narrows it down a lot. And people say, well, what about body fat? Well, that also affects that too. Because it's one thing to do it when you're 15% body fat, right? But a person who trains their legs and has big legs and they're carrying an extra 20 pounds, 25 pounds of body fat more than they need, like if you're getting fat, do you know how much harder it is to hit that weighted chin-up and pull-up number? That is our body composition check. That's our body composition check. And this is why I throw that in there for guys who are talking about health and fitness. Because people say, well, these other numbers, they don't matter. You could just get fat and hit all four of those others. Yeah, that's true. You could, and it would help. It would make it easier. But what happens when you go to hit that other lift? So if someone is only hitting 4 out of my 5 standards and they're fat, they're not hitting all 5 standards. They're not doing what I tell you to do. So it's like one of those things where people would say, well, he just wants us to get big and fat, right? He just wants to be a fat, strong guy. How many fat, strong guys can do dead hang chin-ups or pull-ups with 100 pounds of plates hanging from their waist? Not many. So my strength standards that I'm throwing out here, if you actually meet all 5 of them, you can't be fat. And if you are fat, you're going to have to be stupid strong. Like you're going to have to take your strength to a whole nother level, which has its own benefits. And the other thing you look at when we start looking at the different muscles in the body, if a person is capable of hitting those, even with rep proxies, let's say your 5 rep maxes, we'll estimate to put you there because you do a lot of 5s or you do 8s or whatever it is that you do instead of singles. Is there going to be any muscle in your body that's lagging? Like, are you going to have weak points in your body? No, your entire musculature is going to have to be pretty big, because people will say, well, that might just all be chest or front delts and back and whatever. Okay, fine. You don't squat 400 without quads, not to depth. I'm talking no reps, hit depth, right? You need decent quads. You can't have tiny, untrained looking bird legs and do that. It's not going to happen. Now, you might not look like a bodybuilder. Same thing, that deadlift, your back, your hamstrings, but both of those require you to have a well-developed core. How about that 200 standing press? What about your core? All that's developed. You don't hit a 300 bench without at least decently developed pecs and triceps. And I don't mean you look like a bodybuilder, but you're going to look like you lift. You're going to look like you lift. You see anybody out there without good sized traps, delts, triceps, who can strict press 200 pounds? Just stand up, walk it out, and press 200 pounds over their head and put it back? No. Very difficult. That's a long range of motion exercise, and it is hard to technique that lift up. So we could talk about leverages. I mean, we could talk about, you could arch on your bench and do all that. Okay, fine. Cheating a 200 overhead press up with your knees locked and walking it out, that's harder to cheat. That requires straight up muscle mass in your core, your upper chest, your entire shoulder girdle, your triceps. All that stuff has to be developed because you can't really cut the range of motion. That is a long range of motion lift. So, I mean, you can't lock it without a lot of tricep. You have to have it. And then you throw in that weighted pull-up and weighted chin-up. You can't be a major fat ass. It's very hard to pull that off. It could be done, but it's very, very difficult. you'd really have to work hard at it. Again, 100-pound dead hang from the bottom. Weighted pull-up or chin-up, you're going to have decent-sized biceps. You're going to have decent-sized biceps. You might not have 19-inch arms, but your arms are going to look like you lift. You're going to have rear delts. You're going to have strong lats. You're going to have strong mid-traps. You can't do that without them, and they're going to have some size on them. So when you start looking at all the musculature of the body, if you can hit those 5 lifts that I recommend, and those can be done by a natural, you're going to have a well-developed musculature top to bottom. You're going to have reasonably decent body composition, and it's going to be irrespective of kind of how tall you are. I mean, the exceptions might be someone who's at the extreme. Someone who's 5'1" or someone who's 6'6" might be somewhat outliers, but 90%, 95% of men out there aren't at either one of those extremes. Those are extremes. So don't use the extremes to disprove the rule. And so my point is, with these strength standards, if you can hit all 5 of those numbers, you're going to look like you lift, you're going to be pretty strong, you're going to be pretty big, and you're probably going to have pretty decent body composition, and every muscle in your body is going to have a pretty reasonable amount of development, right? It's going to have a pretty reasonable amount of development. You could focus on just hitting those 5 lifts, and you'll be just fine for most of you out there. And if you want to do some curls, go ahead and do some curls. That's fine. All right, guys, so that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.